Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 318 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on I Survived: Highs, Lows and Lessons from Rape 1 Year On. And it is Sunday, the 13th of April 2025 as I record this. So because my organisation is amazing as ever, with an extremely busy schedule, university stuff, the odd mental health flare-up, apologies. Originally I meant to do this podcast episode a little sooner, but I'm actually recording it exactly 1 year on from when I was raped. So today's podcast episode is more of a reflection of the past 365 days, all the horrific things that I've gone through, but also all the great things I've been through. Like, honestly, if you'd asked me a year ago, or even a few weeks ago, about if there was anything good about the past year, I would have denied it. I would have said no, 2024, the past 365 days was just so awful, there could not have been anything good about it. But actually, there really has been. So, this podcast episode is definitely a deeply personal and is quite a moving and emotional one, because I get to reflect on my darkest moments, including stuff I've never said publicly before. But it also serves as a great reminder that no matter how awful your life seems and how bad your mental health is, things can get better over time. And that's the message that I want to leave you with for today's podcast episode. So it was a great episode. I really enjoyed it, and I think this is going to be great fun for all of us. So you've got that to look forward to in the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the psychology news section first of all, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest. So the first one is, delusional themes may be more varied than we thought. Delusions, fixed false beliefs that cannot be changed by evidence, are a key symptom of many psychotic disorders. Diagnostic manuals like the DSM-5 group them into broader categories, with recurring themes including being persecuted or harmed, delusions of grandeur, or unusually bodily sensations. Yet little research has actually explored the limitations of these categories, whether they are universally relevant or if they vary by culture. A new study in Schizophrenia Bulletin, led by University College London's Elisa Papa, explores these categories in greater depth, analysing 155 studies, together encompassing almost 174,000 participants. The team identified 37 distinct delusional themes, far more than those previously accounted for. The findings also reveal significant cultural variation in how people experience delusion, highlighting the need for a broader, more globally informed approach to psychosis. So I couldn't agree more with this one, because this is the problem with diagnostic manuals, or to be honest, any form of diagnosis instead of formulation. Because the problem with diagnosis is that it's a checklist. You've got these broad categories that are meant to be discrete and concrete, but there's so much overlap. And to be honest, if you try and reduce mental health conditions down to a specific set of symptoms, then you're going to miss tons of nuance. You're going to miss how things actually matter for an individual, and also you're going to miss specific delusional things. So this is not good, and for me personally, this is just more evidence that the diagnostic manuals as a system just do not work. And this is why formulation is so important, because by focusing on formulation, you're focusing on the client's egg experience. How do they experience their psychological distress, their mental health difficulties? And this is why it's even more important than ever to be focusing on formulation and really putting our clients front and center in everything we do, including their own egg experience. Plus, also, a broader, more globally informed approach to psychosis. You can actually say that about any form of mental health condition because different cultures have different variations, different factors, different significances. So, and also different protective factors. So I remember listening to one YouTube video ages ago, and mental health practitioners in some African countries were like they just do not understand why we actually have therapy rooms instead of doing therapy outside in the sunshine where it's warm when it's more pleasant. And actually, I partly agree with that because it's really weird though that we've got the research, we've got the knowledge that being outside benefits our mental health. So why don't we actually do more stuff outside in the environment where mental health actually gets improved? So it's interesting. I think it's good food for thought, and it just goes to show that we do need to be more informed, not only about how coach impacts different mental health conditions, but also the limitations of our current systems. So the next one is teenage girls explain mental health gender gap. Discussions around youth mental health often highlight rising levels of low mood, anxiety, and low life satisfaction. The impact of the pandemic, social media, and academic pressure have all been suggested as drivers for these experiences, with recent findings suggesting that teen girls' mental health is worsening at a faster rate than teen boys. However, research that thinks out what might be driving this disparity is becoming increasingly important. Writing in BMC Women's Health, the University of Manchester's Ola Demskowitz and team investigate the experiences of teenage girls, seeking to draw on their first-hand knowledge to nail down what they perceive to be causing low mood and anxiety across the demographic. The answer reveals a complex, nuanced insight into individual differences, social contexts, and demographic factors that might impact girls' mental health in the UK today. Okay, so if you want to find out more, definitely go over to the BPS Research Digest website and read their write up about it. But for the interest of time though, but what I'm going to say is I'm going to highlight a few different bits and pieces. So first of all, it's really good that this study has actually acknowledged that this is a complex, nuanced issue, and it is an issue because this is a societal issue though, because when it comes from technology, when it comes to academic pressures, social media, the sort of content that we're exposing younger people to, like pro anorexia, pro eating disorder, pro objectification, and also pro beauty content to young women. And then the fact that we are putting this out there with no thoughts on how this actually impacts their mental health and how this drives up eating disorders, amongst other mental health conditions, that is a societal problem. That is something that we need to fix, and that's something that needs to be regulated and legislated for a bit more. There's also the pro self harm and pro suicide content that anyone can quite easily find on social media. So there's a lot of different societal issues. Plus, this is also before we consider gender stereotypes, etc. So trying to reduce female mental health down to one single factor is never going to work. And I'm also really glad that this research team just asked teenage girls directly because because when I was reading this, I fell into the same trap that lots of other people do. Oh, people's self-knowledge can't be that good. What? Well, let's not ask them directly. Let's do a really complex test. However, when it comes to a brand new field of research, I think one of the best ways to actually get started is just ask people directly. Well, directly though, right? Because once you understand how it impacts the people on an individual level, and after you got the qualitative research, that's when you can start to develop egg experiments and you can start to experimental manipulations. If you don't know people's life experience, then you don't know how to manipulate stuff, and then you can't build effective egg experiments. So, interesting food for thought, and I'm really glad that we are starting to realise this gender gap, and also, most importantly, we're starting to research it. Hopefully, in the future, and unfortunately, this is going to take a few years. After we've got more high quality research, we can actually start to create interventions and hopefully decrease this gender gap. So, the last one is elsewhere on the web. Exciting new research suggests that the hypothalamus plays a central role in conscious perception, filtering what we become aware of on a moment to moment basis. This topic is notoriously tricky to study, making this new paper, released this week in Science, a large step forward for the field. It uses data gathered from people with neural devices for treating headaches to illuminate deep brain activity during conscious perception tasks. Analysis reveal marked differences in the brain activity of the hypothalamus and prefrontal cortex when participants were aware of a briefly shown stimuli versus when they were not, echoing early studies in non human animals. Okay, so cognitive psychology and the role of the hypothalamus, and definitely more so for conscious perception, not my area of expertise, to be fair, even though one of my friends is really into it at the moment, and I'm hoping to convince them to do a psychology conversion master's, to be fair, at some point in the future. So I definitely think that it will be very clever if we can understand conscious perception a bit more. But I also quite like this methodology. And I don't know why, when it comes to these podcast episodes, I really do like focusing on the methodology because in everyday life, I really could not care less about methodology too much. But it just shows that I actually do appreciate it a lot more than I think at times. So using neural devices that someone's already got in their brains to treat headaches is actually quite clever. Clever though, because we don't need to do anything more. We just need access to that data. Granted, I'm not sure how that data works, but it's very clever. I'm concerned about the generalizability because if someone's got chronic headaches or some sort of condition where they have lots of headaches, probably migraines, at least that's my interpretation of this article. I would just say that there would definitely be something that's different in the brain because not everyone gets a chronic migraines or chronic headaches that requires a neural device. So I think generalizability might be a little touch and go there, or be slightly decreased, but it's a good first step. So I'll be quite excited to see what would the next steps possibly be for this research in the future. So I hope you enjoy the psychology news section. So let's move on to the personal update. So moving on to the personal update. So this week has been what I call wonderful chaos. Because I have been doing lots of different bits and pieces. Again, nothing that I meant to be doing to some extent. Then though, or to be honest, I get the slight autism problem of starting something and really focused on it, and actually just doing that for the entire day with different breaks and bits and pieces in between, though. So Tuesday, I have a brilliant new Kickstarter launching about Rising Shadow. It's a fantasy adventure short novel. I'm so excited about it. I sent it to one of my author mentors in America, and he's saying that like it looks great, it looks very professional. I love this book, so I'm really looking forward to getting it launched. Launched though. If you're interested in a fantasy fiction, definitely go on Kickstarter.com and type in Rising Shadow, and it'll be done by me. So really, really looking forward to that because the artwork's great. I've got some great merchandise, including coffee. So I'm really am looking forward to that. Something else I've been doing is I finished another Better English book, and I've also been doing my revision for my psychology exam. Now, I did hit a slight snag with that exam because the issue is that because my mental health was quite bad last term, I missed a lot of lectures. So I would rather work and keep my mind busy than actually go to lessons where I could think about trauma stuff. So that was my mindset. So I made a good amount of money, but I really did miss out some important lectures that I'm going to be tested on in a few weeks, probably 3 weeks' time to be fair. So not great, not good. And these lectures were two in particular that I have no basic understanding of. The issue with that is they were not recorded lectures. I cannot find the lecture recordings whatsoever. So I had to read academic papers. I do not like reading full academic papers. I find it so boring, and lots of people do. Normally, I just go abstract, conclusion, maybe introduction, find on page, try and find the bits that I'm actually interested in. That's how I read academic papers. I couldn't do that uh, this time. So I did tend to skip methodology and the results. I just did introduction, discussion, and conclusion to some extent. So that was quite helpful. But it did sort of shoot me in the foot quite a few times. But I read the 5 academic papers that I needed to. I also read this really interesting paper on Confucius values as a protective factor against age-based stereotypes and stereotype threat. So basically, because Chinese culture, because of a Confucius value, it's very important that no matter what, that the young people respect and they help the elderly people without limit and without hesitation, and so they do this unconditionally, even if they do have negative, very negative aging stereotypes. Types though, if you remind people, and well, if you remind Chinese people before they do a memory test, it actually cancels out the stereotype effect. So, quite interesting for sure. I really did enjoy that academic paper. And then Friday night, I submitted my last ever bit of university coursework. I spent a few hours on it, and it was quite. I felt a little sad afterwards, to be honest, because I've done so much university stuff for the past 6 years. Now I'm never going to have to do another bit of coursework unless I get on to the doctorate. So it was just quite like, wow, I'm surprised. Like, no more university stuff. No more having to talk about essays or basically have to read academic papers. Even though I've actually got some of my own academic papers to write up. It's just stuff like that though. And I remember actually getting this feeling, 2 years ago when I submitted my dissertation. And it's a surprising feeling because you don't expect to feel sad that you've submitted something though. But when it's the final thing and when it marks how close you are to the end of your degree, the end of your psychology journey, or at least one stage of it, you do feel something. And plus, I'm very, very excited to say I'm now an Irish citizen. So I'm now a dual national. So I now get my EU passport. I'm going to submit my Irish passport application in a few days because someone needs to witness it. I'm really, really happy that I'm a dual national now. And and it was a long process, but I'm really glad that I've done it. So, as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So, you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment at the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me at sci-fi whiteley or leave a comment on the Facebook post or LinkedIn post. I always love to hear from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And also, please feel free to send pictures of where you're listening in from all over. I love to see where you're listening from. And today's episode has been sponsored by Applied Psychology, applying social psychology, cognitive psychology, and more to the real world. So, the reason why this is a great sponsor for today's episode is because something that I do repeat, and one of the main themes of today's podcast episode is how I was only able to survive. The only reason why I was able to have my heart is, and the only reason why I'm still here today, talking to you amazing people, is because people were able to apply psychological theory to the real world. They were able to say, right, we know in theory this should work, and this is what happens to someone. This is how trauma impacts their behavior. But how do we actually apply this to the real world? How do we take a practical aspect to that? So that's what I want to show you. Psychology is so much more than theory. It's so much more than just sitting, reading a textbook, doing some experiments. Psychology can have amazing real world impacts. And I flat out love psychology because of it. We can help so many people. So this great, really easy to understand book shows you how to take theories from developmental psychology, sports psychology, social psychology, misogyny, cyber psychology, misinformation, language development, and so many more fascinating topics, and actually create real world interventions that help people based on psychological theory. This is brilliant. It's amazing. I flat out love this book because it's really helpful. And this is why psychology is just flat out brilliant. And we also talk about business psychology, which is something that I don't tend to talk about much, but it's really interesting. So I flat out love this book. It's amazing. So I know you're going to love it too. So that's applied psychology, applying social psychology, cognitive psychology, and more to the real world. And you can get the ebook available from all major online retailers, and you can order the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon, local bookstore, or local library if you requested. And you can get the audiobook narrated by artificial intelligence from selected audiobook retailers like Spotify, Kobo, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and selected library systems, including Overdrive, Biblioteca, and Baker & Taylor. So, whilst buying books helps to support the creation and the editing of the podcast, my time is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. And as always, a massive thank you to my patrons, as your support shows that you like the show and you want it to continue. So, if you want access to tons of great rewards, including over 50 blog posts that won't be made into podcast episodes for months or years, until the future, then please head on over to patreon.com/the Psychology World podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, now you can at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. So that's enough for the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about Isolived, highs, lows, and lessons learned from rape 1 year on. This is going to be a great episode, So let's dive into it. 1 year anniversary of my rape. So on the 13th of April 2024, I was raped. And as much as I know some people will call me a liar because of the societal myth that people assigned male at birth will never get raped and they are always the rapists. That is a lie, and I've done a lot of research over the past year about the truth behind sexual violence and how and why men and women can both be the sexual predator and the survivor. Hence, I'm going to be honest and I'm going to tell you my experience. And if people call me a liar or a fake just seeking attention, then so be it. I have been called it all over the last year, so this will not be anything new for me whatsoever. Therefore, on the 13th of April 2024, I was raped in a hookup that went very wrong. After a lifetime of being abused, hated, and never accepted for being gay, and with my friends all in happy relationships where they could do whatever they wanted without fear of death or being beaten, I just wanted a single night of being gay. A single night where I could experience something that was perfectly natural and normal for a lot of people, and a single night where I could be free. It really didn't work out like that at all, so I was raped. Contrast all the myths and lies about sexual violence. I didn't scream, fight back, or try to make him stop. I simply went into survival mode and I fawned because I didn't want to make him angry. I didn't want him to hurt me any more than he already was, and I just wanted to escape as soon as possible. So I survived. I was in denial for 2 days about what happened to me because I thought that was simply how sex worked. Then, as more and more trauma responses manifested themselves, I realised I was raped, and then everything that happened. I developed post traumatic stress disorder along with intense social anxiety, so I couldn't really go out by myself because I was so anxious and terrified of being raped again. And I've discussed a lot about what happened to me over the next 7 months in different episodes of the Psychology World podcast. Now, I want to focus on the lows and the lessons that I've learned first before wrapping up with the highs of the past year, along with a few final lessons. The lows of the past year after being raped. The post traumatic stress disorder. There have been a lot of different factors and mental health consequences that have not been fun in the past year. I think the worst, because it encompasses so many different facets of my mental health, was the post traumatic stress disorder. That was seriously horrible to experience because the majority of people think it's just soldiers who can experience PTSD. Yet, I did because whenever a rape memory was triggered, or I was reminded of my rape, whether this was through something I saw, something I heard, or an intrusive thought or flashback, I had severe trauma reactions. I would literally run away at times. I would get so fearful and scared that I was going to die, get raped, or get beaten, or I would go into survival mode. And once I was safe, I would have a full on breakdown because it was simply too much for me. And one of my triggers was seeing fat men. Now, I don't say that to be fatphobic, but because my rapist was a fat man, I couldn't actually stand to be in the same room as a fat man because it would cause me to have a breakdown or enter fight or flight mode. The same went for hearing or thinking about the name of my rapist or experiencing any sort of sexual or romantic attraction, which was really tragic. Believe me, that. Believe me, I laugh as a coping mechanism, but you don't know how tragic that actually was for the next 7 months. Because whenever I thought a guy was cute or attractive after my rape, I would have extreme trauma reactions. That was really horrible because I was raped in April and then it was summer, and I don't deny that I like summer because men can look really hot in shorts and t-shirts. Again, I just wanted to add a bit of humour to this podcast episode. And sleep was another major issue because of my rape dreams. There wasn't a single night for the first 6 or more months when I didn't have a rape related dream. It wasn't even related to what actually happened, it was just my mind twisted everything. I had dreams about my rapist killing me, my friends raping me, people I had only briefly seen at social events raping and beating and killing me. That was my life. The first lessons: rape has no end of impacts, need for processing trauma, and self compassion. On the whole, there were other aspects of the PTSD that I flat out hated, like the intense social anxiety and the depression that I've spoken before about on the podcast. Yet the stark impact that sexual violence has on a person was unreal, and I couldn't believe how many different ways it impacts you. From my work, to my friendships, to my ability to go outside, and everything else, my rape and mental health impacted so much. As a result, this massive negative aspect of 2024, where the entire year was basically taken up by me healing from my rape and recovering from my sexual trauma, this aspect taught me the importance of having good friends and a good social support network, and never underestimating the power of trauma. In one of my books coming out in the next few years, I include the line: if you don't deal with your trauma will deal with you. And that is so true. You need to keep healing and processing what happened to you, otherwise, your trauma will make you process what happened to you in the worst ways possible. As well as this low taught me the importance of self compassion too, which has become an important part of my life now. I used to beat myself up so often for my mental health, feeling so depressed and anxious and having such severe trauma reactions I couldn't do anything for days or months at a time. I essentially didn't have a life in 2024. And that made me feel even worse about myself, my life, and my mental health. Thankfully, learning self compassion helps me deal with a lot of those negative self critical thoughts. I still use all of these important lessons in my life nowadays to help my mental health whenever it dips. Self blame and people who know less judging me. A second major blow of the past year was that at first I didn't blame myself for my rape because it wasn't my fault. Rape and any other form of sexual violence is never the survivor's fault because there was nothing they could have done to prevent it. That is the simple truth of it. However, when I started reading things online, seeing how certain people who were very dear to me start blaming me, judging me, and making me feel awful for what some rapist had done to me, that only made my mental health worse. For example, two people who were very close to me and were meant to love me no matter what couldn't handle the fact that I was raped. So they blamed me. They wouldn't allow me to call it rape. They wouldn't allow me to talk about it. And they were very firm that it was my fault. I shouldn't have done it, and I shouldn't have been gay. And as was researching rape and sexual trauma more and more was very healing for me, was it allowed me to see everything that I was going through was normal. It reminded me of the world I actually lived in and how society saw people like me. It reminded me that sexual violence is extremely common. Society always blames the survivor, and the world is always against the survivor because of myths, lies, and misconceptions, and the extremely rare cases of false allegations of rape don't help matters. Therefore, as I was exposed to those societal judgments and certain people in my life judging me and blaming me for being raped, my mental health only declined. And what really annoyed me about these people was that I am unfortunately an expert by experience when it comes to rape. I was raped. These people were not. Yet, because of their egos, and what they've seen on the news, they believe it is their God-given right to tell me, the rape survivor, how I am meant to be feeling, how I am meant to be behaving, and how I am not meant to be getting raped. It is outrageous and disgusting that people think they know better than rape survivors. Second lesson, you learn who your friends are after rape. The second major lesson I've learned in the past year is that after being raped, you really learn who your friends are. You learn who you can rely on, who you can't, and how people can deal with certain news. My best friend could certainly handle the news about my rape, and they were great to me for the longest of time. And I will always be extremely grateful for everything they did for me. Yet honestly, because of my disorganized attachment and their avoidant attachment and other traits of my best friend, we both turned our friendship to be very toxic, and our friendship has never really recovered from my rape trauma and everything we accidentally did to each other during that time. There have been friends who I've told and they act like it never happened, and others who let me talk about it, but they don't know what to say. I don't blame them at all because rape is awful and it is hard to know what to say. As a result, in the past year, I really have learned the different levels of friendship that you can have with people, what you can and what you cannot say to others. And I have learned a lot about attachment and friendships in the last year. At the time of writing, actually, I'm doing a lot of work on my own disorganized attachment style. But even though I'm making great progress, I want to deal with it as much as I can so it doesn't harm any more of my friendships and relationships. Self harm and suicidality. This was probably the lowest part of the past 365 days because I self harmed a lot in the past year. I haven't self harmed since the 31st of December because I can deal with a lot more things than I previously could. And I have worked really hard to deal with whatever happens, including learning that certain people who I'm close with were having sex. Again, even thinking or learning about sex was a major trigger up for me until recently, even though a year later, sexual contact is still too much of a trigger for me at the moment. I think I self harmed because I wanted to punish myself for being raped. A lot of important people in my life were telling me that it was my fault, that I should have done things differently, and I interpreted certain things as being my fault. For example, I remember last June I was driving to university in the evening for a social event. And I parked my car. It's a beautiful evening, and I was listening to the radio. I was listening to a news report about a cop congratulating a rape survivor for coming forward because they were able to arrest the rapist because of it. I cried so hard, and in the end, I self harmed over it. For me, as other people were telling me that I was a failure for not reporting it, for not going to the police, and a whole bunch of other factors, I felt that I needed to be punished, and control was another factor too. I self harmed because I wanted to be in control, and I wanted to feel something instead of depression, anxiety, and other responses. And as my mental health continued to decline, I'm gonna be honest. Um, I went to I went to kill myself 3 times. I won't explain how, but I tried to kill myself 3 times, and this was how I learned how strained my relationship with my best friend became. They were so badly hurt, in so much pain, and later learned that they were actually having panic attacks over me. From that point onwards, was because they really didn't want me to die. I really did destroy our friendship with these suicide attempts. However, contrast to popular myths and lies, I didn't want to do suicide because I wanted to. I tried to kill myself because I didn't think there was another way out. My quality of life was so low and I couldn't go outside. I couldn't do anything with my life. My mental health was so bad that I couldn't enjoy anything. I doubted I ever could have formed a good relationship. I doubted I could ever have sex, and so many other factors. I just couldn't see another way out, and I suppose that I knew I would hurt my friend and my housemates, yet I just didn't want to be in pain anymore. I just wanted it all to end. Third lesson: life actually does get better. So, there have been other lows in the past year, like my anorexia, but I'll talk more about them in one of my books coming up in the next few years. As a result, in the past year, I've learned that in the end, life really does get better. It will take a while, believe me. It seriously will take so much longer than you want. Nonetheless, your life will get better over time. It will be small changes at first, and you will be able to do more and more over time, and it will never seem enough. You will be angry, upset, and depressed that you cannot magically bounce back from your sexual trauma, but you will get there. If you keep putting in the therapy work, if you keep healing, and if you intend to survive this, then you will in the end. And now, as I transition onto the heights, I'm really looking forward to sharing with you the positives of the past year, since I was raped. The highs of 1 year on from being raped. Becoming an expert by experience. So believe me, I fully understand this is a very, very weird benefit of the past year, but as an aspiring clinical psychologist, honestly, I'm glad to have the mental health and counseling experiences that I have. Now, I understand what it's like to have PTSD, to have intense social anxiety, and to have major depression. Of course, everyone's experience is slightly different, but I can now understand and empathize with future clients because I vaguely know what hell they are going through because I've lived through it too. I'm grateful to know how to survive these awful mental health experiences, and I'm really glad that I went through specialist rape counseling and my anorexia counseling. I have learned so much about myself, self soothing, and trauma recovery because of my excellent two counselors. I have had such lovely and powerful conversations with both of them, and I've learned tips and tricks and techniques that I can now use with future clients once I'm qualified. Without my rape, I never would have learned those things. Of course, I am not saying I'm grateful to be raped. I will never be grateful for having gone through that. But I could look back on the past 365 days with hatred, bitterness, and I could not focus on any positives. Yet that it isn't actually healthy. Still, grieve for everything that you've lost, been through, and allow yourself to feel all the painful emotions that you're experiencing. Yet, as part of positive psychology and compassion for ourselves and others, we should try to focus on the positives too. It is actually a great way, in my personal experience, to push away suicidal thoughts. Even on the really, really bad days, if you can name 3 or 5 positive things that happen, no matter how small they are, they really do help to make you feel better. It is a simple but very powerful technique. So, for the past year has taught me anything, it's been a lot of valuable techniques, life experiences, and mental health experiences that will serve me in the future. It means I can relate to clients more, come to clinical work with a unique perspective, and it gives me more experience to draw on when I'm writing these podcast episodes. I am a survivor, not a victim. Healing, healing, and more healing. So the penultimate high is a great benefit of the past year. I'm finally healed from all sorts of different traumas that have happened to me in my life. I explain more about this in my upcoming book, Healing as a Survivor. But the majority of my rape trauma responses were actually just heightened trauma responses that I got from my childhood was my childhood abuse. I was able to deal with all of that. I was able to learn healthy boundaries and how to be empowered for the first time in my life. I flat out loved resetting my boundaries and resetting my relationships with so many people because I am not perfect at all. Yet I want to stop the harmful, toxic relationships that have ruled my life for so many years, and I am already reaping the rewards. Furthermore, I'm healing in terms of my anorexia too. My weight really did refuel my anorexia to new levels, and I was losing a kilogram a week for months. I was making myself really ill and fatigued all the time. My health wasn't the best because of the condition, but in the past year, I've healed more because I've targeted my anorexia. Sure, I still had the condition because you can't eliminate a mental health condition, but I know how to cope with my sense of control, strong emotions, and my anorexic thoughts. I'll continue to have flare ups in the future, but I seriously doubt my anorexia will ever get bad again. I know how to manage it, and because I know who I am, I know what my values are, and everything that anorexia threatens, I really don't want my anorexia to return. And at the end of the episode, I share one of my favourite quotes of all time, because it nails this topic on the head. New friendships, and I had a partner. In the past year, some of the highs have definitely included the new friendships that I've made along the way. A good few of them haven't lasted because of my mental health, my disorganized attachment, and a few factors related to the people themselves. Yeah, I really enjoyed making those friendships because they were all great people, and I honestly wish them all the best in the future. Equally, now I have friends who I spend almost every Saturday with, playing board games, International Dungeons and Dragons, or another RPG system. It was only yesterday I met up with three of them and we played board games outside in the sun, and I am slightly burnt. Only slightly though, I promise. Before we moved inside and we played for another 4-ish hours, and then we went to dinner at All Weatherspoons in Canterbury. I really enjoyed these Saturdays on because I never would have met or became friends with them otherwise. I had a lot of fun with them, and we always had great conversations. And that's how I met my partner, which certainly isn't something I expected. After I was raped, given all my mental health struggles, how bad I was at social relationships, and my low self esteem, I never expected to have a relationship for 6 weeks, and it only ended last week, to be fair. 6 weeks full of laughter, fun, and just enjoying being someone's partner. I had my first kisses, I held someone's hand in public for the first time, and I was able just to do stuff I never was able to do before. Things I never would have dreamed a few years ago, because of I was just too terrified because of trauma. And I know the idea of me getting excited about holding someone's hand in public is honestly really childish, and it's so innocent. But I loved that, honestly, and like kissing someone in public, I just flat out loved. Like it was just like a few pecks on the lips, but it was still meaningful because for my trauma background, I never thought I would be able to do that. And we both stayed up until 4:15 in the morning one day, just talking, hanging out, and cuddling. I really enjoyed that relationship more than I want to admit, even though it was casual and I was able to do casual. And we didn't even break up after 6 weeks. We weren't into each other. We broke up because making out with my partner brought up a lot of trauma for me, and my partner had been repeatedly assaulted in their past relationship, so they were struggling too at times, and they weren't in a good place themselves. My partner agreed if they were in a better place, they would want something deeper, more meaningful, committed, and longer term with me. And ever since we got together, they've been saying how they didn't want to hurt me. It was sweet, and there's a lot more to it. but considering this is a public podcast, that's all I'm going to say. However, I still really enjoyed it, and after I was raped, I would never imagine forming new friendships, certainly not playing Dungeons and Dragons for hours, and I never actually imagined someone as beautiful as my partner would say yes to me. There really is always hope. It doesn't matter if you were raped, it doesn't matter how much trauma you've been through, it doesn't matter how dark you think the world is. There is hope that great, wonderful things can happen to you in the end. It might take far longer than you imagine, or it might take no time at all, but it can happen in the end. Brief guide to actions we can take to end sexual violence. So, in the future, I do have another podcast episode on actions we can take to end sexual violence once and for all, because it is possible. Yet, I want to briefly mention 3 things we can do at the end of this podcast episode to work towards ending sexual violence. You need to learn about sexual violence and share it with others. So, I know I'm hopefully preaching to the converted here, but if we're going to end sexual violence, then you need to learn about it, what it is, and the truth behind sexual violence. In other words, you need to overcome all the myths and misconceptions we've created for ourselves in society, because these myths are harmful and they're extremely common. Therefore, it's good to know that online resources, like this podcast, have made it easier than ever before to get accurate information about sexual violence and how common it is within our communities and how it devastates lives. Knowledge is power against sexual violence, so please make sure you read about it and learn about sexual violence. Then the next step is to share what you've learned with other people. You can advocate for youth prevention programs. So I've spoken before about how the majority of perpetrators of sexual violence are teenagers and young adults. Therefore, if we're going to stop sexual violence, then we need to give young people the knowledge and tools for healthy relationships. This includes tools that help them understand consent and have healthy sexuality. Therefore, over the years, there's been a lot of work on the development of youth prevention programs to help give young people the tools to have healthy relationships without them believing they have to commit sexual violence. You can identify organisations and people working with sexual assault survivors in your community and connect with them. To help take action against sexual violence within your community, you can see who's doing prevention and response work in the local area. For example, this can include a family justice centre, a rape crisis centre, and local political groups in charge of legislating against sexual violence. This can be a powerful way to take action to end sexual assault, because by reaching out to these organisations, people you can get involved in their networks, and by being an active member, so you can use your interests, skills, and abilities to support them. For example, if you identify a gap in their resources, like there being no way for people to donate to the local cause, then you can help fill that gap in the community's network. Conclusion. In all honesty, I probably haven't even scratched the surface of all the highs and lows for the past 365 days. For instance, I've not mentioned all the good things about university, my mental health studies, my outreach work, my family, my new Irish citizenship, and more. Yeah, that's a good thing. The past year has been hellish. I don't wish my past year on anyone, because of everything in my life that has fallen apart, been smashed and annihilated, and everything that I had to go through and just do just to survive. No one should ever have had to go through this. No one should ever have to go through post-traumatic stress disorder, the rough and eye-opening experience of learning who your friends actually are in your darkest moments, and the self-harm and suicide. No one should have to go through that. However, me and so many other amazing, bright people survived our trauma. There were great benefits of the past year too. And 2024 will be an extremely transformative year for me, in some bad ways, but a lot of good ways too. The past 365 days have allowed me to reset my relationships and actually learn who I am through doing a lot of healing. It's given me some great real world experiences about mental health difficulties and how to cope with their maladaptive effects. And I've forged some great friendships too. I had a beautiful partner for 6 weeks, and we might not be together anymore. Yet my partner's still happy to kiss, hold hands, hang out. So I'm happy, so I can still experience stuff for the first time in my life. Ultimately, I want to end this podcast episode by saying if you're a aspiring or qualified psychologist or psychologician, there will be times when you meet a client who has experienced a type of trauma. It might be sexual trauma or not. The past year has also taught me how outrageously high the number of sexual trauma incidences are. And when this happens in your clinical work, it is important that you remember it is possible to thrive and you believe it in yourself. My anorexia counsellor and my old private counsellor, who I forgot to mention earlier, they have no training, no real awareness about sexual violence. Yet, there are still great things that they helped me with and just helped me through my time. The best result is always to refer rape survivors to rape crisis centres, because East Kent's rape crisis centre is flat out amazing and they helped me to save myself. However, aspiring and qualified psychologists should get some awareness in psychological trauma and stabilization. You will come across a client with trauma one day, and trauma is specialist work, but you can help the client more than you possibly know. And finally, if you're a survivor, then please keep going, keep fighting, keep working towards healing. It will be painful, it will be slow, and there will be days when you just want to die because it seems so much easier. Please don't, though. If I had managed to kill myself any one of those 3 times, I would not be here right now, talking to you wonderful people. I wouldn't be able to share my experience. I wouldn't be able to learn all the great things I flat out love. And I wouldn't be able to write, read fiction, and do all the other thousands of things that make me happy. And I wouldn't have been able to meet my partner, have my first kiss, and just be with someone. We're still friends now, and I've cried a lot over that relationship, because I hate that someone raped and assaulted my partner, who's such a lovely and caring person. Sexual violence has to end one day. Open quote. As long as I have my unshakable self, I can dig in with both feet with all my might. As long as I know who I am, all my doubts, hesitations, and frustrations will disappear, and no demon on earth can escape my descending blade. Close quote. Tomito, Demon Slayer Anime, Season 4. And if you think about that quote from a mental health perspective, then you realise why it's my favourite quote of all time. Just keep going yourself, and remember, it gets better in the end. So, I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got something out of it. I know that I did, because this year has been hell on earth. I really don't know how to express that so deeply. I've hated this year, but there have been such good things that I've loved about this year. Like as I've said in the episode, holding someone's hand in public, hanging out with a partner, having such great friendships, getting my Irish citizenship, doing such great outreach work, and just learning who I am, like my core values and everything. Watching Demon Slayer, watching that anime, and getting that great quote. so many things I've loved about this year. And yeah, I will never say this to minimize what I've been through or what any other survivor goes through. We go through so much, and I know I'm lucky that I've been able to basically sort of heal within 7 months, within a year. And I know some people never heal, and I feel so sorry for them. I wish I could hug them and take their pain away. Believe me. And yeah, it's rough sexual violence, and it needs to end. But now you know what I've been dealing with. You know a fraction of what I've been dealing with for the past year, in terms of highs and lows and everything I've learned along the way. So thank you for listening. You're amazing if you got this far. And yep, and life is really, really good for me at the moment. I know I'm going to struggle into the future. Like, I've learned that in the past few weeks. Making out with a partner shouldn't be that distressing, but it's going to continue to impact me in different ways. And that's something I'm going to have to deal with. But now I'm aware of it, I've got a lot of tools to help me, so I will get really distressed at times. I will struggle. I will get depressed and anxious. My anorexia will probably flare up at times, but I know how to deal with that now. Because, as Tomato says, I know who I am, so I can dig in with both feet with all my might. And because I know who I am, all my doubts, all my hesitations, and all my frustrations will disappear. Because I know who I am now. It only took some idiot raping me to help put me on that path towards self-discovery and healing. So it's an interesting take on what happened to me. So thank you for listening. And if you know of someone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. Always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And if you want to learn more, please check out Applied Psychology, applying social psychology, cognitive psychology, and more to the real world. Available in all the usual places. And if you want to get tons of great rewards and support the podcast on a monthly basis, then please head on over to patreon.com/The Psychology World Podcast. And head on over to buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis. Now, everyone, to mark this 1 year anniversary, I'm going to finish my mocha. I'm going to go downstairs with my housemates and watch a comedy live stream. Because it's Sunday, so it's been really busy. But I want to mark it and do something a little different in a unique way. So, have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at connorwhiteley.net. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time.